We can only wonder at the tremendous forces that lifted these mountains from the earth and created this rugged landscape. Born of bedrock and sculpted by ice, the Teton Mountains are imposing sentinels of a spectacular and isolated valley, Jackson Hole. The Teton Range was shaped by 100,000 years of ice, and it was the icy grip of winter that kept these mountains wild for thousands of years. Here, winter is the dominant season, lasting half the year and clothing the mountains in deep snow and numbing cold. To live here in the Tetons is to endure months of frigid weather. Long after the territories surrounding Jackson Hole had been divided and farmed, the fierce winters of the Tetons would discourage settlement. Incredibly, the first homesteaders did not challenge the valley until 1884, 12 years after neighboring Yellowstone was made a national park. But the severe winters that discouraged humans would protect wildlife from encroaching civilization. Bison found a refuge here, where the land was not generous, but was undisturbed. Using their massive heads to plow the deep snow away from vegetation, they survived. Elk that retreated from the developing frontier found a haven in the secluded valley. Wintering along the Snake River, the elk enjoyed easier foraging in the shallow snow near running water. The near-freezing water may be 70 degrees warmer than the frigid winter air, creating a blanket of warmth that permits some elk to endure the bitter cold. Abundant food brings the moose to dense willow thickets near the Snake River. As though designed for winter, the moose travel easily in deep snow, reaching high into the willows to nibble tender shoots. The Snake River, following in the stream bed of its glacial ancestor, freezes over only in the severest winter. It provides an important feeding area for the river otter and the bald eagle. As long as the river stays open, bald eagles remain in Jackson Hole. But on colder days, the ice-choked channel makes fishing a difficult challenge. Cold water and ice pose no problems for the dipper, an aquatic songbird that searches the rocky stream bed for insects. Even in the worst of winters, the dipper needs only a small patch of open water to supply its needs. Though severe, winter in the Tetons is a fickle season, and the first few months can see periodic spells of warming and refreezing. During the icy heart of winter, open water dwindles and the few unfrozen ponds collect resident trumpeter swans. Though they normally live in small family groups, the swans must share their winter feeding area. As a result of overcrowding, territorial disputes occasionally erupt. Trumpeting and head bobbing help to reinforce the pair bonds of lifelong mates, and the mood proves infectious. As the last of the great glaciers of the Ice Age retreated, hardy wildlife found sanctuary amid the extreme conditions of the Tetons. But they were not to be alone forever. Nomadic Indians were guided into Jackson Hole by the towering peaks, which they named the Hoary-Headed Fathers. French trappers would rename them Les Trois Tetons, the Three Breasts. Though harsh winters discouraged permanent habitation, several Indian bands shared the valley's summer bounty. A shy band of Shoshone Indians frequented the Teton area, eluding aggressive neighbor tribes and hunting wild sheep, a practice that earned them the name sheep eaters. With the passing of the Shoshone, Jackson Hole would enter a new era. But the Indians' respect for wildlife and their reverence for the earth would help shape the future of the Tetons. Many descendants of the Shoshone were to marry mountain men and teach them the secrets of the Teton wilderness. A few hardy explorers and trappers followed the Shoshone trails into Jackson Hole as the Western fur trade developed. And so began the brief and colorful era of the mountain man, a time that stamped an enduring flavor upon the frontier. John Coulter claimed to have discovered Jackson Hole in 1807, and beaver soon lured the mountain men into the valley. Their campfire tales spread rumors of plentiful beaver and unforgettable mountain peaks. When in time the beaver grew scarce and the demand for their hides diminished, the mountain men departed, leaving behind only their place names, their stories, and legends. Trapper Davy Jackson gave his name to the valley they called Jackson's Hole. When the snows deepened and travel became too arduous, the mountain men would follow the elk out of the mountains and down into the valley. As winter progressed, the elk were forced into smaller and smaller meadows in search of food. Trapped by deep snow, the elk would wait until spring to return to their high mountain ranges. The harsh winters would claim the lives of thousands. Scavengers wait patiently for the weak and old to succumb to the hardships of the season. When the elk die, the coyotes prosper, gathering to feed. A strict social order prevails at these communal feasts, and the younger animals must submissively wait their turn. An elk will provide food for all. After feeding, the fastidious coyote cleans his muzzle in fresh snow. Each year, the elk follow traditional paths to their wintering grounds in the valley. Here, bountiful grass from the summer supplies food for the winter. The first settlers in Jackson Hole quickly found that the best ranching land was also desired by the herds. Early residents staked their claims to prime summer meadows, and each winter the elk encountered new obstacles. The rich grasses that once fed the vast elk herds were now harvested for cattle, and drift fences were built to guide the migrating animals away from ranches and into one area. In 1912, Congress established a national elk refuge, but new problems arose. In 1927, biologist Ollis Murray was assigned to investigate a mysterious winter die-off of the herds. His wife Marty, after visiting the local library to learn where she was bound, arrived in the frontier town of Jackson. The Murrays would spend their lives here in a rustic log cabin, and their work would influence generations of naturalists. The world she found in Jackson Hole inspired in Marty Murray the desire to preserve the natural beauty around her. Under the spell of the Tetons, she began her own career as a writer, an eloquent voice for conservation. Recorded in a series of books, her observations of wildlife and mankind became classic reading.
I think in the early days the ranchers were proud of having this big elk herd, and yet at the same time they had to be concerned about their own haystacks, and the elk were certainly likely to get into those to quite an extent. The thing about the elk was that they were dying off in the winters, and people thought they were starving, and some of the ranchers were trying to feed them, and they were concerned when the elk seemed to be in trouble. I think they were all concerned about the preservation of the Jackson Hole elk herd.
To keep the elk away from the ranchers' haystacks, they were fed surplus hay purchased with state money, and funds were provided to expand the size of the elk refuge. A line was drawn between man and elk, and the citizens came to feel a special kinship for the animals wintering in their backyard. This was the spirit Marty Murray found in Jackson when she arrived.
Well, we were living in the town of Jackson several winters, and in the town the roads were sort of plowed. There was always a pathway, at least enough so you could walk. No, people got around with sleighs too, and quite a few people had horses that were the kind you could hitch up to a sleigh, and that's the way the doctor made his rounds. I remember that. There's always a way of devising ways of living. I think we felt some isolation from other counties in Wyoming and from the country as a whole, so that we were here to make the best of what was here for us.
The 6 months of winter seem forever to the snowbound pioneers of Jackson. But by April, winter's hold weakens, and the warm winds from the outside world breathe new life into the Tetons. Though high in the peaks, winter lingers for another month, at the lower elevations, the rhythms of spring have begun. Now new plant growth outlines the banks of the Snake River and provides fresh browse for winter's survivors. Long before the mountains have shed their mantle, waterfowl find nesting sites on quiet streams and beaver ponds. Here, as in seasons past, golden eyes take advantage of the early spring to raise their broods before the melting snow can flood their nests. Though trumpeter swans are on their nests before the last snow melts, it will be late fall before the cygnets have gained the strength to fly. While spring gives way to summer in the valley, high up in the Tetons, winter still persists. Deep beneath the mountain snows, the pika waits out the long winter. Related to rabbits, the pikas defend a small year-round territory of rocks and scattered patches of vegetation. Their harvest of last year's grass sustains them through the long, lean months of winter. Only when spring finally arrives in the peaks will the marmot emerge from its long hibernation. The brief alpine summer will afford the marmot only 2 months to gain enough fat to sustain life for the next 10 months of dormancy. With their vast winter accumulation of snow, the Tetons act as a huge reservoir, releasing water throughout the spring and summer. Cycles of freezing at night and thawing during the day slow the loss of water from the peaks. But the steady downward flow continues to wear away the hard granite, a grain at a time. Mineral-laden water from the melting snow forms rich, cascading streams at the foot of the Tetons and supports a variety of wildlife. Nesting on the protected slab of a boulder, the dipper is perfectly at home in these turbulent mountain streams. The adults feed in the racing stream, gathering the larvae of aquatic insects. Young dippers are as indifferent to the icy water as their parents and will begin foraging for themselves soon after leaving the nest. Fresh, clear water from the Teton soon brings to life a spectacular display of spring wildflowers. On the lower slopes of the mountains, there are rich meadows, where an array of blossoms colors the short season, tracing the progression of spring. On the valley floor, vast fields of lupin mark the onset of summer and the emergence of coyote pups from their dens. The young coyotes are taught to stay close to the den while the adults hunt, but their curious nature makes patience difficult. During past droughts, pronghorn antelope established seasonal migration routes from the plains to the mountains. In Jackson Hole, they found not only grass, but the open flatlands they favor for bearing their young. Odorless and nearly invisible, the newborn pronghorn seems to vanish into its surroundings. Within hours of its birth, the fawn is up, and within a day it is rejoicing in its own speed. As spring reaches into the mountains, the elk herds desert their winter refuge and follow the melting snows up into the high country. Along the way, in late May or early June, the cows pause at their traditional calving grounds to give birth to a new generation. Here in the high mountains, the herd will find cooler temperatures and fewer biting insects. Elk calves are not as precocious as the young pronghorns, and the first weeks of life are critical to their survival, for at this time they may fall prey to bears and other large predators. The black bear is a voracious hunter of newborn elk, but it lacks the speed to catch the calves in the open meadows. Instead, if it hopes to feed on elk, it must rely upon surprise. The geological processes that shape this land have left behind a complete and legible record of the past. The Teton Range is the youngest of the Rocky Mountains, formed only 9 million years ago, when the western landscape began to buckle from pressures deep within the earth. In a series of jarring earthquakes lasting over millions of years, a huge block of granite tilted up to form the Teton Range, while another tilted down to create Jackson Hole. Receding glaciers later filled the deep valley with loose rock, leaving a flat plain of cobble at the foot of the jagged peaks. Vast glaciers of the last ice age sculpted the Tetons into their present shape, and the remnants of these mighty ice sheets still endure. High in the protective cold of the peaks, small glaciers still work their artistry, scraping the rock and pushing up moraines. Where the ice is gone, beautiful alpine lakes now fill the void. Large glaciers that carve the distinct U-shaped canyons through the Tetons push their moraines clear to the valley floor to spawn a sparkling chain of reflective lakes. When 12,000 years ago the Ice Age withdrew from the Tetons, a raw and broken land was revealed. High in the rocky cirques, there has been little change since then. There are few animals here, and their populations are small. The hardy marmot and the pika, with its fur-covered feet and stockpiles of food, manage to make a home in the seemingly bare rock. Among the life forms that have adapted to the harsh mountain environment, with its long dormant winters and short season of warmth, the brilliantly colored alpine wildflowers seem almost misplaced in their stark world of granite and ice. Here, at 11,000 feet, there are few insects, but the vibrant colors of the mountain heath attract solitary bees to ensure their pollination. Though they are bright, the flowers are not showy, and to avoid the wind, most grow in dense protected mats close to the ground. While vegetation is sparse, there is enough food to support the ravenous appetite of the marmot. It feeds furiously now in the first few weeks of the alpine summer, before retiring to its bed for almost another year. The marmot has adapted to this bleak mountain environment by eating and sleeping away most of its life. It took thousands of years of glaciation and erosion to sculpt the Tetons, some of the oldest rock on Earth, and it took centuries for life to find a delicate foothold here. Yet for all their strength, the Tetons remain a place of fragile beauty. In 1929, the magnificent Teton Mountains and their jeweled lakes were set aside as a national monument. Now, the Tetons would remain forever, much as the mountain men had left them. Today, 2.5 million visitors a year pass through Jackson Hole. But despite these growing numbers, the spirit of respect for land and wildlife endures, making it possible to still experience wild animals in their own domain. Travelers now come to capture for themselves the feelings of John Coulter or Davy Jackson upon first witnessing these majestic sights. From their inception as a national monument, the Tetons drew more and more people each year. In 1950, to expand the park, Congress annexed the entire north end of Jackson Hole. Many homes were engulfed, including the log cabin of Marty Murray. Now, Marty continues to speak out for wildlife conservation, surrounded by the beauty which he strives to save.
The place was rich in wildlife, and happily I think it still is, because the people do really think about it a lot. We found that, well, suppose we're camped at the head of Arizona Creek, a bear might amble through in front of the cabin, a coyote would be howling in the middle of the night, maybe. We found that there were other animals sharing the range with the elk, like the mule deer in some parts, and wonderful animals like otters that if you could sneak up and watch them diving around and playing in the water. I think the wildlife, for whatever reasons, is as plentiful today as it was then, which is a cheerful note. The wildlife has been considered very kindly by all the people who live in the valley.
Kindness came nearly too late for the American bison. The last great herds were massacred on the western plains in the early 1800s, and by 1840 they were gone from Jackson Hole. In 1948, 20 bison from Yellowstone were brought to the Tetons. Though they were protected in a small enclosure, disease slowly took its toll. In 1968, the last 15 bison escaped their confinement, and 6 more died in vain attempts to recapture them. Finally, the remnants of the herd were permitted to run wild. Today their numbers exceed 100 healthy animals. Symbolic of America's wild frontier, the free-roaming bison of the Tetons are a living reminder of Jackson Hole's spectacular past. By late summer, snow in the Tetons has retreated. Each morning the sun warms the mountain air and draws out clouds of vapor. But the scant moisture soon wisps away into the parched Wyoming air. Warm summer winds continue to dry the land. Lightning finds a lodgepole pine, and fire climbs quickly through the ladder of dry limbs. An age-old process of renewal by fire has begun. Although the dry vegetation is easily ignited and fanned by wind, natural fire breaks slow the progress of the flames. And at the top of a barren ridge, a wildfire dies from lack of fuel. Though the smoky ruins seem lifeless, the recurring fires only lightly touch the land, leaving intact the seeds of regeneration. The forest will regrow, and in the process will support a greater diversity of wildlife. Water continues to flow, and new life quickly sprouts along the stream banks. Not all natural changes are as dramatic as fire. By damming streams and cutting trees for food, the beaver alters the face of the land. Vegetation flooded by the dam will die, and the surrounding willows will be harvested and eaten. A forest of aspen and willow may give way to a pond, and when the beavers move on, the pond will slowly fill with sediment to become a lush green meadow. The lodge where the young are born and raised is a marvel of design. The only entry is through underwater channels. Inside, on a raised platform, the family remains warm and dry through the most severe Teton winter. Throughout the summer, the beavers dine on fresh bark and leaves. But with food cached away, and with a network of channels providing easy access to the surrounding willows, the beaver family is admirably prepared for 6 months of winter. By damming streams for its own benefit, the beaver creates a habitat which supports an entire community. Aquatic plants take root in the beaver's pond, and fish soon appear from upstream. After a winter of subsisting on tough willow limbs, the moose finds tender water plants growing 6 feet below the surface of the beaver pond. The moose calf learns from its mother what plants to eat, but it hesitates to follow her into deep water. The beaver dam requires constant upkeep to maintain its water level. Stimulated to begin repairs by the sound of rushing water, the beaver arrives to patch a break. Within hours, the leak will be plugged, and the level of the pond will again begin to rise. But when a hole in the dam coincides with a spring flood, the structure cannot hold the torrent. In a day, the beaver pond will be gone. The lodge is abandoned by its tenants, and in time, it will blend once again into the earth. The old beaver pond, once a home for waterfowl and trout, now sprouts a verdant stand of grass. Only time can reveal the subtle changes in the natural world. Marty Murray has spent a lifetime observing these gradual transformations.
Natural rhythm, especially in a valley like this, is something that perhaps most people don't think about, but it shouldn't be ignored. It's an interesting thing to know about. And I'm sure that there is a rhythm in a certain piece of land carrying certain kinds of trees, and then something happens to those, and another species comes in, and this goes on and on. And if people could understand that a little more, they might not be so fast to just savagely clear land, and things like that we need to learn, especially if we're going to live in a valley like this, where you can see these things happening almost day by day.
With the coming of autumn, the rhythms of the valley assume a brisker pace. It is a time of change and preparation, and the Tetons reflect a new mood. As they have for hundreds of years, the elk of Jackson Hole respond to the arrival of autumn in the Tetons with their annual mating rites. In the frosty chill of dawn, a bull gathers his harem of cows and calves. His bugling call claims this herd as his own and challenges other bulls to respond. Practicing their technique, two young bulls prepare for the challenge to come. But another season will pass before they are called upon to fight in earnest. A lone bull tries to join the herd, but his challenge is answered by a mere bluff from the old bull, the master of the harem. By sunrise, the elk cows and calves make for the cover of the forest. After one last bugle, the bull joins them in their retreat. A time of quiet settles upon the Tetons. For many, this is the turning point, when some must migrate or risk being trapped by snow. Then winter gently moves in upon fresh winds. Cold air sweeps the last warm breath of fog from the canyons, and soon the first snow drifts over the Tetons and into Jackson Hole. With a final friendly spar to end the fierce battles of their breeding season, the bull moose move on to their winter range. Now the antelope leave Jackson Hole for their winter pasture on the dry plains to the south. With its thick winter coat and its cunning as a hunter, the coyote is well equipped for the long months ahead. Snow soon sends the last sandhill cranes on their long flight south. Winter returns, and once more a hint of the great ice age touches the Tetons. Deepening snow now drives the elk from the highlands. From as far as Yellowstone, 60 miles to the north, they follow traditional paths to a more certain winter on the National Elk Refuge. This vast retreat shelters the elk from human encroachment. But where their range borders civilization, the wildlife must coexist with man. Deep snow forces mule deer to seek easier foraging in the lowlands, and many find it in the town of Jackson. In the early 1900s, a tradition of feeding the herds at Jackson Hole was established, and it endures today. 3/4 of the elk's historic winter range has been developed by man, and the feeding is now necessary to prevent starvation. When the elk leave Grand Teton and Yellowstone parks, they enter a less natural but more charitable world. Fed daily through the worst months of winter, the elk adjust quickly to the horse-drawn sleighs and their cargo of hay. In areas surrounding Grand Teton Park and the Elk Refuge, private ranches feel the impact of migrating wildlife. Like many residents of Jackson Hole who harbor a special kinship with the wilderness, a rancher feels an obligation to share the food meant for his horses with a herd of wild moose. Wild animals are not fed within the national parks, but surrounding ranchers who have witnessed the starvation of animals feel the help they give is a justified payment for the human encroachment on the wilderness. Civilization has come to Jackson Hole, and it has brought increasing development to compete with the wildlife for the land. The National Elk Refuge is preserved to exclude human habitation, but each winter thousands of visitors ride horse-drawn sleighs to see the elk herd firsthand. The human impact on the animals is minimal, and for the elk, life goes on. Changes in their feeding system have proved a greater challenge for the elk. With machines that would surely have startled their ancestors, elk on the main refuge are now fed pellets of compressed alfalfa in place of the cumbersome baled hay. Because the elk refuge is fenced only to separate the elk from man, it is open to all wild animals which wish to wander in. Bison discovered easy winters among the elk, and their presence sometimes disrupts the normal feedings intended for the elk herd. But who is to say which is more deserving of the land? For both bison and elk have endured long winters in Jackson Hole before the first humans arrived. The inherent spirit of respect for wildlife found in Jackson Hole is demonstrated each year at the local airport. Though they normally use open spaces in the sage flats to display for females of their species, male sage grouse have found the paved airport runway an ideal mating ground. This timeless ritual survives unchanged in the face of modern civilization. The sole inconvenience for the grouse is the occasional interruption when the most dominant of all the birds arrives. curious blend of the wild and the civilized has been a hallmark of Jackson Hole since its discovery. From dancing sage-grouse to the marmot sleeping at 11,000 feet, life has found a magic place here within the Tetons. Here mankind came late and listened to the wisdom of the land. Why does magic still endure here? Perhaps a lifetime under the spell of the Tetons has given Marty Murray the answer.
What if we could pretend or believe that some great spirit once upon a long time ago decided, let's see how we can make a perfect valley. We would need mountains to begin with, and then we would need some flatlands to show off the mountains. And certainly we would need some water running through. There would have to be a river. And on the side, at the feet of the mountains, there would have to be lakes. Maybe more than one or two or three. All these things would go together to make a perfect valley. I think the spirits are here. I think they've done as good a job as anything could do. I can't think of any basic thing that I would change if I had the power to change it.